Let's talk about the solution architect. So the solution architect, I've highlighted the architect in the team role diagram right here. So the architect is basically wedged between the functional analyst here and the lead developer here. So the role of the architect is to take the functional specifications from the functional analyst and turn them into a technical specification. And we're talking about a high-level technical specification. So this is a helicopter view, 10,000 feet up, looking down kind of perspective on what needs to be built. And this is a technical document, but there is no code anywhere. There's no implementation detail. It's all high level. So the architect creates this document and then shares it with the lead developer. The lead developer is responsible for implementing the architecture specification. So the solution architect and the lead developer are going to have this really tight working relationship. So I'm drawing an arrow to signify a working relationship. So these two roles, these two people, need to have a really good working relationship because they're both working on the same thing. They're both working on a technical specification, but the architect has the high-level abstract view from the top, and the lead developer has the concrete implementation view from the bottom. So it's two perspectives, but it's two perspectives of the same thing. So the better the cooperation between these two roles, the more successful the project will be. So let's take a look at the responsibilities of the solution architect. The solution architect is responsible for technology. So this person, this role, is formally responsible for all the technology in the solution that's being built, all technical issues. So to formulate that in a negative way, if anything is wrong with the product after deployment, the executives will come to the architect and complain, because everything technical is the responsibility of the architect. So this is a massive responsibility. Really, if you're an architect, the technology really has to be of high quality, because you are responsible for the technology. So architect responsible for technology. So the architect, I said it already, converts the functional specifications, the functional requirements made by the functional analyst, and turns them into a technical architecture. Now, to do this, it requires a balance, a very careful balance of design patterns, of requirements, of elegance, and of technical concepts. Quite often it will be difficult to adhere to all the functional requirements with a simple technical solution. And there are often trade-offs to be made. So the architect really needs to do this balancing act of trying to make as many people as possible happy, while at the same time delivering a kick-ass technical infrastructure. And it's a difficult job. The architect also needs to research key technologies. For example, if the architecture calls for an AI system, so like a neural network that receives input and creates decisions based on that input, then you're going to have to do some research to make sure that our current level of AI technology can actually do that. So the architect will need to either perform the research himself or herself, or lead a small development team to do this test to make sure that, in this case AI, is up to the task. So any block in the architecture that uses untested technology needs to be verified, needs to be tested before deployment. So there's a lot of key technology research involved as well. Now, when you look at design path, if you look at an architecture from a high point of view, from a helicopter point of view, it's mostly design patterns. An architecture is basically just a collection of design patterns clicked together like Lego. So an architect needs to know all the design patterns. You need to know all the patterns, and you need to know what the pros and cons are of each pattern. The architect motivates and guides the development team. I mean, you create this technical architecture, so you need to sell it to the developers. So you constantly need to motivate the team to support your architecture and implement it. And I find this one very important. Massive underline. The responsibility of the architect is to make sure that the lead developer is successful. So keep that in mind. The lead developer is your ally. It is your linking pin to the development team. So your responsibility is to make this person successful in any way that you can, by selling your architecture to the lead developer, but also supporting the lead developer if he or she has problems or has challenges. This is often overlooked. Quite often it's like there's a wall between the architect and the lead developer and they just throw stuff over the wall. That is not how it's supposed to work. The two are supposed to be a tight-knit team. Let's take a look at the skills of the solution architect. I've boiled it down to 3 major skills. You need to have functional understanding, because as an architect you receive the functional specifications, so you need to understand these specifications. Functional understanding of what needs to be built. You need to have technical knowledge. Not too much technical knowledge. I mean, you don't have to be a kick-ass programmer, because the lead developer will do the coding. But you need to at least understand the technology. You need to understand design patterns. You need to understand the pros and cons of different patterns. You need to understand, like, what are the disadvantages of a microservice architecture. You can't just throw it into your architecture and think, hey, it's going to work. So you need to understand how patterns combine and how technical problems can creep up on you and how you can resolve these. So technical understanding is important. Finally, leadership skills. Essential for the architect role. You need to have leadership skills to sell your architecture to the organization, to cultivate your relationship with the lead developer, and to smoothen your relationships with the executives, with the C-section, with the functional analyst, basically with the whole organization. You are responsible for technology, so you have to sell the technology to the company. So you're going to have leadership skills to do this. So let's take a look at a more detailed breakdown of the skills. The architect grows out of the lead developer. So the career path goes from developer to lead developer to architect. I said it before, it requires a great relationship with the lead developer. You need to maintain a helicopter view at all times. One of the biggest pitfalls of being an architect is that you go to the implementation level. You're at your helicopter level, looking at the overview of the architecture, and then you can't resist. You just go down to the implementation level and you start coding. Wrong. You always have to maintain at the high level. There's a different guy or girl doing the implementation. It's not your job. So stay at the helicopter level at all times. You need to have a deep understanding of design patterns. You need to know all the patterns, pros and cons, and how you can combine them into architectures. You need to be fluent in UML, Unified Modeling Language, so that you can draw your architectures in a standardized way, in a standardized diagram for all people to understand. Sometimes organizations will use different tools like rational rows, so an understanding of these tools is also going to help you. And you need to have experience with code generators. Because sometimes an architecture is translated directly into code using a code generator. So knowledge of these tools and technologies will also benefit you. So let's look at the pros and cons. The pros of an architect is it is a super high value position. It is the most important leadership position you can have within an IT team. So you're right at the top of the corporate ladder, at least within a project team. The salary reflects this. You often have a great salary, so that's really nice. The role is extremely visible. You are responsible for technology, everybody talks to you, you talk to everybody, you're clearly visible. You're like the CEO of that particular project. And you are safe from outsourcing. You cannot outsource an architect role because it requires so much leadership and so much direct communication with other people. So you're safe from outsourcing. But now the cons. It's hard to stay up to date. You need to have a very broad understanding of technology, and it requires lifelong learning. So you really have to prepare yourself to keep learning new stuff over and over and over to maintain relevant, to stay relevant as an architect. It's also difficult to get right. Creating an architecture that makes everybody happy is really, really hard. Quite often there are trade-offs where you can make one person happy and someone else extremely unhappy. So when you do that and you deploy this product based on your architecture, it's very hard to deliver a successful end result. It's really a balancing act. It's more art than technology. It's possible that you get bad requirements from the functional analyst. This is really hard to spot because they look awesome on paper. It's just not what the business wants. So to guard against that, you might have to look over the shoulder of the functional analyst a little bit to make sure that the specifications are okay. So that's a challenge. It's not officially part of your job, but you have to hedge against that risk. And finally, you are responsible for technology. So if anything is wrong, they're going to blame you. So there is a ton of responsibility on your shoulders when you're the architect. You cannot screw up. Let me repeat that. You cannot screw up. If anything is wrong with the product, they will come to you. It will all be your fault. So you need to handle this responsibility and you need to have the skills to produce something that will actually make people happy. So this is difficult. It is not an easy job. Okay, so that in a nutshell was the solution architect role.